Good evening and welcome to the second of our three April of 2020 outturn videos, during which we'll be tasting the whole range of the outturn in twos, the intention of which is to give you a wee bit of a comparison between some of the whiskies in the release. This particular pair both come from the vicinity of the town of Elgin in Speyside, one of the more famous distilling towns. And they have a number of similarities and a number of differences, which we'll get into. The most obvious difference here is that we have in the first whisky, the number 85, a 12-year-old from a second fill American oak barrel, and in the second whisky we have a 22-year-old in a first fill barrel. So that's an obvious difference, but we'll get into some of the more specific ones later on. But just to kick off initially with the 85, gentle and evocative. Hopefully you can see that. 12 years old, refill barrel, 58.8% alcohol. And this comes from a really interesting distillery, which we don't see very much of, bottled by the owners. And it's a real pleasure to see in this format. Very unusual, as I said. They use worm tubs for the condensing of the alcohol vapours, which adds a certain amount of complexity to the spirit. They have quite small stills, which they run very slowly and which are fed by a wash which has a very, very long fermentation time, around about 90 hours, all of which result in a very complex whisky, and one which tends to have very, very fruity character, as well as herbal and spicy characteristics. So let's have a wee look at this one. Colour wise, it's a light gold, as you'd expect from a second fill cask, American white oak. And on the nose, this is really very typical from the distillery. Very fruity, herbal notes for sure, grassy, slightly spicy. You really don't get the alcohol very much on the nose at all. Very light, very delicate. And on the palate, almost puts you in mind of wine gums. It's very fruity, but not so much fresh fruity, more confectionery fruity. Bananas, peaches, pears, and then a slight sort of drying, spicy herbal as well. Have a little bit of water here. And that opens it up really well. So we taste. So a honeyish sweetness coming through, and that floral note coming through really nicely as well. Drying on the side of the palate. Really lovely whiskey. So it was the 85.56. Now let's move on to putting on the Ritz. So this, as you can see, is a 22-year-old whiskey from Distillery 35, and it's the 211th cask from this distillery, so quite late in the piece. And this distillery, as I said, is quite close geographically to the first here. Sits down by a river, as a matter of fact, and pretty regularly floods. They have a lot of traditional dunnage warehousing on site, and they do also have rather small stills as well, sort of a medium fermentation period. So again, pretty typical for the Speyside region, although that dunnage is unusual. And I don't know if it's auto-suggestion, but I certainly get a dusty, earthy, musty character from this one. So I mentioned first fill barrels for this, or barrel I should say, single cask. But not so sweet as you might expect. That earthy note coming through, and quite savoury over the top, so a bit of barley. Not much fruitiness on the nose, 53.3% alcohol. So what we taste. So the fruit note really coming through very nicely on the palate here, and still that savoury note, something of overripe fruits coming through. Let's see if water releases the fruitiness on the nose. Really long finish, as you'd expect from a 22-year-old. The nose is definitely opened up with water. I'm getting something like those banana sweeties, but really not juicy fruits, very austere. The big fruitiness is more on the palate. Is that, yeah, musty, earthy. Oh, yeah, herbal notes really coming through with the water as well. Really interesting. I actually expected those to be more similar than they were. Much juicier in the case of the 85. And this was a real surprise. Very complex, long finish, but a lot less sweet than you might anticipate considering the cask type and the distillery of origin as well. So a couple of really interesting whiskies there. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.